if you're worrying about your period being late or irregular or unpredictable and it's making you worry that something might be wrong with your fertility, then this video is for you. I want to reassure you right from the start that a late or long cycle does not automatically mean there's a fertility problem. Even if you are usually as regular as clockwork and then a period just doesn't turn up for some reason. I work with many women who are worried about their fertility, and for many of them, they are micromanaging their cycles. They're counting days, entering data into apps, obsessively searching for information on the internet. So when ovulation doesn't happen on schedule, they feel like something has really gone wrong. Their anxiety starts to build and they start worrying about the impact of stress on their fertility. And I know what this feels like. When I was trying to get pregnant, there were no such thing as smartphones or apps. They just didn't exist. So I had a little tiny red book of all of my dates. My predicted ovulation was circled in pen, and I had a system set up so I could tell which pregnancy test I could take on which day and how accurate that pregnancy test would be. I was so overly organised and analysing every little piece, and my stress levels were so high. So let's go back a step. In school, we're often taught that a woman ovulates in the middle of her cycle. In fact, my son recently sat his GCSE biology exams, and I was amazed at how simple they had made the entire menstrual cycle appear. It isn't simple, and it's governed by lots of factors. From a Western perspective, ovulation depends on a very precise conversation between your brain controlling the hormones and your ovaries. The hypothalamus and the pituitary glands release hormones, which then tell the ovaries that it's safe to ovulate. If the brain senses some kind of stress, usually a rise in cortisol levels, which can be either because of a physical reason, which might be flying, or you've had an accident, broken a leg, or an emotional stress, which is usually more common with women that I treat, that can then interfere with the ovulation. It pushes it back. It delays the ovulation or sometimes skips it completely. And that then makes your cycle length longer. So this doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's just a normal response that your body is having because of the situation that it's in. Your body's actually saying, is it safe for me to ovulate right now? Is this a safe time for me to conceive? Or shall we just hang on a little bit longer and see if this gets a little bit less stressful? So there are two key parts to your cycle. The follicular phase, where the body builds for ovulation, and then the second phase after ovulation, which is where your body builds a hormone to hold on to any potential pregnancy. And in traditional Chinese medicine, these are known as the yin phase and the yang phase. So in order for conception to happen, you need to time intercourse with when ovulation happens. And then there needs to be enough time in the luteal phase for the body to hold on to that pregnancy in order for it to continue successfully. I do go into this in a lot more detail on the next video, Ovulation Comes First, so you can always skip onto that next. In traditional Chinese medicine, we look at the cycle in terms of a balance between yin and yang. For ovulation to take place at a predictable, regular time, then we have to make sure that A, there is a strong base of yin, and we are nourishing the blood to make sure that the follicles can be matured and the uterus lining is thick enough. We need to make sure that the liver blood and the qi is moving smoothly around the body, calming the emotions and reducing any anxiety. And then it's just as important to nourish and support the yang phase for the second half of the cycle, helping to sustain and hold on to that pregnancy as it develops. So it's really important you know exactly when you're ovulating and not just relying on an app to tell you, so that you're aware of any imbalances and you can adjust your diet, lifestyle accordingly. So I have worked with hundreds of women who are tracking their ovulation with an app, only to realise that when the app says they're ovulating, actually isn't correct. And let me just explain a little bit about how this works. An app uses a mathematical algorithm to calculate when it thinks you're going to ovulate. In fact, it's pretty basic. You've probably already put into your app how long you think your cycles are, 28, 32, whatever days. If you've put in 28 days as your normal cycle length, the app will then say 28 minus 14, okay, that's when I think you'll ovulate next month. Great. And if you have a regular cycle, you might just go off what that app is saying. Okay, it says I'm committed to my ovulation window. Great, let's go for it. But it is more than possible to ovulate on day 20 and have a 28-day cycle. In fact, I see this a lot in my clinic. Women who think they have a regular, predictable cycle, because that's what the app's saying, and that's when their period's coming, but actually their ovulation is happening at a different time, and that's why they're not getting pregnant. So the first thing I do when I see a patient in my clinic is say, how are you tracking your ovulation? Show me your data. And they pull up all this information. I think, oh, yeah, I know the problem. We're not using our bodies to tell us when we're ovulating. We're using an app, and that isn't accurate. Let me give you an example of a patient of mine. I will call her Rebecca because that's not her name, but everything's confidential in my clinic. She came to see me after trying to get pregnant for 2 years. She'd had an early miscarriage several years ago, but nothing had happened since, and that was starting to cause an awful lot of anxiety and distress. She brought to me her tracking systems. She was using 2 different apps to measure her cycle, and she'd also created a huge Excel spreadsheet. Like, I'd never seen a piece of work like this. It must have taken her hours. And she was then monitoring on that spreadsheet her predicted ovulation, how long her cycles were, the rhythms of the moon, her emotions, like everything you can possibly think of. Every symptom was tracked and recorded. And it caused so much stress for her because she'd gone right down to the bottom of this rabbit hole of worry, over managing, over assessing everything, and nothing was happening. So I could see by looking at this that her cycle length was varying from month to month, and her ovulation sometimes was delayed by up to 3 weeks. She'd been for every blood test and scan. There was no reason that this was happening, and polycystic ovaries had been ruled out. So she'd started to think that she was in the menopause. And that's actually quite a common thing I see in the clinic. Something goes wonky with the cycle, and all of a sudden we're panicking. I'm in the menopause, I'm never going to get pregnant. And that's super rare with women in their 30s, early 40s. So when we were starting to track her ovulation a bit more scientifically or accurately, using temperature charting, we could see that high levels of stress at the start of her cycle would often delay her ovulation. But that her second phase, the yang phase or luteal phase, was usually a good length, 12 to 14 days, and therefore more than capable of supporting a pregnancy. So what we needed to do is to look at the yin phase, that beginning part of her cycle, and encourage ovulation to happen earlier. So while stress was impacting the timing of ovulation, we could see that it was still happening. So it's more than possible for her to get pregnant. We just needed to address how we approached it. And in fact, I used to say, don't worry about the worrying. The worrying is delaying your ovulation, but it's still happening. And if we track it properly, you can still keep trying until we see that ovulation's happening. And then you can be reassured that things are working and you've got a chance of getting pregnant. Don't worry about the worrying. So I just wanted to reassure you that having a longer cycle or having a late cycle doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. It's not your body malfunctioning. It's not something going wrong. It's not that you're in the menopause, probably. What it means is that your body's having a reaction to the situation. For some reason, your stress levels or flying can actually interrupt this a lot and delay your ovulation. For whatever reason, it's just delayed. It doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. It's not the length of your cycle that matters. What you need is 4 key things. 1, ovulation. Ovulation that we can detect accurately, not just using a rhythm, not just using an algorithm on the app. We then need 2, time intercourse before and just after that ovulation. Do not stop just before you see the ovulation happening. You must continue just for a couple of days. I have a lot more information on timing this, which will be on one of the other videos. You can have a look at that soon. So we need ovulation and we need to have timing intercourse around the ovulation. The third thing you need, and please do not forget this, it is just as important as everything else, is good sperm. So often, it's women that I'm talking to, they want to know everything they can do to optimise their chances, and it's very rare that the guys are picking up the phone or sending me emails going, what can I do to improve? The sperm is just as important. And then the fourth thing that we need is a second phase of your cycle, the yang phase, which is greater than 11 days. 11 to 14 days, you can hold on to a pregnancy. Anything less than 11, we have an issue with the luteal phase. And we can talk about this in more detail later. So if this video has made you realise that you're not actually sure when you're ovulating, or if you're ovulating, or if you're tracking it properly, don't worry, I've created a free download. There's a link on my YouTube channel that you can click on that and download and just work through at your own pace and get reassurance in your own body. It tells you how to track your ovulation and what not to worry about. It's super important that you understand what's happening with your body so that you then have confidence that you can get pregnant rather than spending hours and hours searching on Google or ChatGPT trying to find an answer. Just click on the link and I really hope it helps. And don't worry, if you need more advice on some of the subjects we've covered today, just subscribe to my channel and you can see all of my videos. Good luck.